Looking for an EHR that's built for the way therapists work? From automated scheduling and billing to customizable notes and treatment plans, Simple Practice gives you everything you need right at your fingertips. Learn more at simplepractice.com.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhelm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy. This is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our lives, the things that happen in our field. And about a year ago, we decided to start on a little project where we were interviewing some different people at pre-license points in their career. And we had some really wonderful listeners reach out to us as part of this project. And after a year has passed, we are embarking on checking in with where people have been over the last year, how they've grown, what kinds of new perspectives they have on things. And we are joined today by Derek Isetti, one of the wonderful people who's alongside this journey with all of us, and so excited to be able to check in and see how the last year has been. So thank you so much for coming back and spending some time with us again today.
Thank you so much for having me. I was telling Katie, it's just, I can't believe a whole year has flown by. It's totally surreal.
It's wild. So we'll ask you the question we've been asking you from the beginning, which is, who are you and why do you want to be a therapist?
Oh, goodness. Well, my name is Derek, and last time we spoke, I was in the middle of a Master's of Social Work program. Now I have graduated, and so I am very excited at the prospect of becoming a therapist. I think last time I mentioned it was sort of a mix of practical reasons, kind of given the nature of my current job, interfacing with students quite a bit. But I feel like it's very sacred work. I've always kind of felt that way, and so I look at it as an opportunity to continue to grow and what I'm able to learn and what I'm able to provide to people. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. And I'm officially done with my program now, which is kind of cool.
Congratulations.
Yay. Thanks.
So how was the finishing of your grad program? How was graduating, getting registered with the BBS?
So I have to give props. Let's give a shout out to my program because they had a special graduation ceremony just for the 24 of us, complete in a whole gymnasium just with us. Some friends of mine put my face on popsicle sticks and were waving them obnoxiously in the crowd.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind, but in terms of getting registered with the BBS, I feel like I'm a cautionary tale. In fact, I think the message of the podcast today is like, don't be a Derek. Like, don't do...
Oh, no.
Well, I mean, some of the things are just ridiculous. Like, you might want to make sure you write down the correct social security number on your live scan fingerprinting form. Like, that would probably be a good idea.
Sure.
Yeah. And of course, I realized my error as I was walking out of the live scan location. Like, oh, no. But I ran back in and they were like, oh, it's already processed. But then the other thing is, I had the bright idea of applying before I actually graduated because I thought, well, if there's a very long wait, why don't I get in early and then I'll have my transcript sent after, you click the little box, wait until my degree is posted. And so I had that bright idea, but apparently there is such a thing as being too early because I requested that my transcripts be sent like in July. And even though I checked the box, please wait until my degree is posted, my university, it slipped under the radar. So they never sent them in. And so the BBS ended up sending me a deficiency notice saying, hi, we're missing your transcripts.
Oh, dear.
Oh, I know. So just don't be a Derek. Just follow the rules. Just wait until you're actually graduated and then send in the info.
So have you started with any of the exams or anything yet?
I actually, this is interesting. I'm the only person in my cohort so far to have attempted the law and ethics exam. I didn't want to waste any time, so I took it on Halloween, which was a scary experience, pun intended. And thankfully I passed, so that was exciting. It's very nerve-wracking, they don't even show anything on the screen. You have to wait, to leave your computer terminal, and then the person who checks you in at the testing center hands you a paper printout basically saying you've passed. No explanation of like how you did or what you scored better on. It's just you passed or you didn't pass. So, but I tell you, I have never taken an exam with more questions that seem like there were two really, really great answers. Like I must have flagged a third of them to go back and revisit. And I do have to give a shout out. I'm Ben Caldwell. I don't know him personally, but I used his test prep book and I think it really helped. So high pass education, little shout out to Ben Caldwell.
We'll have to call him and get a little sponsorship deal. Thanks.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, so it was fun. It was neat to be the first person in my cohort. They're like, wow, Derek, you didn't waste any time. But I had actually heard it's better to take that exam earlier because, hopefully the law and ethics that you've learned about in your grad program is still relatively fresh in your mind. So that's good. Yeah.
Tell us where you're at practice-wise. What kind of clinical work are you doing these days?
Well, that's kind of a sad state of affairs because I, for anybody who listened to the first podcast, I was in a unique situation because I'm teaching in academia and I don't want to give up that teaching job. So I knew that my path to licensure would be a unique one because I would need to collect these hours on a part-time basis. But one of the thoughts I had was maybe I could volunteer my time at the university counseling center. Because for people who are listening that are curious as to how you can accumulate these hours towards licensure, most people become W-2 employees, but you can actually sign a volunteer contract. The BBS allows for that. And so I reached out to the counseling center, and sadly, because they're undergoing a change in leadership, they were initially excited, but they actually ended up telling me, you may want to seek other avenues for those hours and maybe we'll get back to you. So my attempt at volunteering my time didn't really work out. And so, it hasn't, you're going to laugh, but I feel like there is some secret networking group that I don't know about. Where almost like a Club 33 at Disneyland, like this ultra exclusive club. You knock in a certain pattern or there's a password like countertransference, and then they let you in. And then there's all these group practice owners that are like, I'm hiring an associate. And I might be interested. And I just don't know where this networking site is. So maybe offline, the two of you can give me, all the goods. But yeah, it hasn't been super easy. I feel like there are lots of jobs once you're licensed, but finding those associate positions, it's tricky. It's tricky.
It's also a weird time, I think, with what's happening in the profession, what's happening in the world, and so it does make sense. So I don't think you're alone in struggling to find something, especially given that a full-time position isn't really on the table right now. So I think that's interesting. What were your expectations about, kind of graduating and getting out into the world, and how is your experience compared with that?
I just kept getting the messaging like, wow, therapists are really in demand. We need them now more than ever, especially since the world is burning. But,
Yep.
And I got some validation along the way, which was wonderful. My last placement was with the county. So it was 5 days a week over the summer with the county. And my supervisor was like, are you sure you don't want to stay here? You sure, my clients really liked me a lot. And they didn't have many male therapists. And so some of the teen boys that I was working with, like their families were like, look, if he doesn't get a male therapist, we're not going to stay, So I feel like had I been more like a typical grad, I think those opportunities would have presented themselves. Like I feel like I would have had an easier time. I even had one interview where they said, Derek, it was a group practice. And they're like, we're really looking for somebody that can take on like 30 clients a week. And I just knew that just wasn't feasible for me. I'm looking more like 10 clients, 10 to 15 a week, probably.
As a therapist, your time is precious, and Simple Practice helps you protect it. Their new AI-powered note taker creates structured progress notes in minutes, so you can wrap up sessions and move on with your day. Easy-to-use billing features take the hassle out of getting paid, even when insurance is involved.
Another great perk? Scheduling is simple for you and your clients with unlimited automated appointment reminders. Make the most of every day with an all-in-one practice management solution that lets you focus on the work that matters most, connecting with your clients. Join over 225,000 practitioners who trust Simple Practice to keep their day running smoothly. Start today at simplepractice.com.
So I think, the expectation was there that I think I would have a harder time accumulating those hours on a part-time basis, but I don't think I anticipated how difficult it would be. For example, I won't name the company, but there was a job I applied for through Indeed, which is obviously a large, job site. And so I applied, and it was specifically doing teletherapy for older individuals, like on Medicare. And I thought, well, I have about 5 years of experience doing weekly online teletherapy groups for people with Parkinson's as a speech pathologist. And so I'm like, I've got the experience working with the geriatric population. I have the online experience. And I got the next day what looked like an automated response, almost like it might have been like AI. Like maybe a computer scanned my CV and they just said, we don't think you have the appropriate background skills required. And I thought, well, like, really? Like, even my age would have been an asset, Like, what person on Medicare wants to take life advice from like a 23-year-old new grad? Would probably be like, my grandkids are older than you, So even the fact that I was in my 50s, I thought, well, that would be an asset working with people over 65. But yeah, it's just odd. It's like, at least give me a phone screen, at least reject me based on my personality, rather than some, sort of AI response. Yeah, so it sounds like a wah wah, like, cry fest, but I'm sure the right position will appear.
So I know that we're doing this interview very shortly after you become registered. It starts your 6-year clock with the PBS to accumulate your hours. You're looking for something that reasonably over the next 6 years, 10 to 15 hours a week, could get you to licensure on time. Is there a point where you're kind of future panicking where, all right, if I don't have an ideal position by a certain point, then I'm really going to have to reevaluate my life?
Yeah. I mean, it's true because that 6-year mark, even if I can reapply for another BBS number, like the clock starts over. So well, it doesn't completely start over, but I wouldn't get to, let's say, count those hours in the first year, they would kind of go to waste. And there are also some interesting rules that I couldn't work in a private practice setting on a second associate's number. So the other thing that made me panic a little bit is I thought, I know, because I work in academia, I can take on a lot more clients in the summer because I don't teach. So like May through August, I pile them on, give me as many clients. But, a friend of mine said, and it makes a lot of sense practically, you can't just tell clients that you've been seeing, like, okay, now school is starting back up, so I'm now going to scale back. Like, theoretically, you need to carry those clients through for continuity of service. And so I was like, gosh, that's a great point. So even if I may want to take on more clients at a certain time of the year, I need to make sure that those clients are still seen, if not by me, by another therapist. Maybe when I start to become more busy in my teaching. So the other thing that's been interesting, and I'd love to get your take on this because I know you've both been supervisors. One practice said, we'd be willing to take you on, but you, Derek, would be responsible for bringing in every single client that you see. And so you would be building your caseload slowly over time. And that's interesting because that seems to be kind of a polarizing topic in the supervision world. Like some supervisors say, oh, no, 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 you're still learning to be a therapist. That's where your focus should be. But then other people say, no, that's great practical advice for learning how to market and build your own private practice someday. So I don't know. Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have strong opinions about it. I've seen different pre-licensed associates have different capacity for that, and I think it's something where if marketing or networking or those types of things are already in your wheelhouse and you want a reasonably smaller practice and just need that supervision to get going, it could be a really interesting pathway.
Hmm.
And I think that there is that other element of it does mean you're learning how to run a business at the same time as you're learning to be a clinician. And so I think it's determining your own capacity for that and the ability to take the time to do the networking and grow a practice and all of those things because it is a lot of work. That's why caseloads aren't usually 30 for folks who have their own practice because you have to get out to those networking things. You have to make sure that you're doing marketing and advertising exercises and those types of things. And so I guess I'm just saying it depends. That's such a therapist answer, but it depends on the pre-licensed clinician. What are your thoughts, Curt?
My practice is combination of both. That we do try to market to people on our team, but we emphasize a lot around the person of the therapist aspects and that people are going to connect with therapists that they know well. And one of the best ways for people to know the therapist is go and get to know people and get to know them and market the practice and extend yourself outside of the office. And we have roughly 8 years of podcasts that I direct people to as far as saying, here's ways to be able to do that and establish that human connection outside of the office. It is an entirely different skill set than what is oftentimes taught in grad school to be able to start to incorporate some of those business aspects into here's the next phase of learning. And I do know some clinicians that are out there that say, congratulations, you've graduated. Now it's time to learn how to be a therapist.
Yeah. To your points, I feel like it's very much dependent upon the clinician and sort of even what their goals are in life, right? If somebody really wants to learn how to build their own private practice, I think it would be really valuable as well. So, yeah, it's interesting. And I went back and actually listened to a podcast the two of you did from 2022 on the supervisory process. Dr. Amy Parks, she was uh, collecting basically a database, like a national database of supervisors, and so it's fun. I mean, I'm pretty confident I'll wind up in a good spot. It's just that it's so interesting that I'm in this transition period right now where I've graduated but I haven't started working. So it's an interesting place to be in. But hey, I at least have a job, so I have a steady stream of income coming in. So I feel like I'm not really in a position to complain too much.
I don't know that I had a clear sense of who I wanted to work with at the stage that you're at. And so I'm asking this question knowing that you may not know. But when you're thinking about the future and the type of clinical work that you're wanting to do when you're fully licensed, do you have a sense of what that is so that you could design an ideal trajectory?
Yeah, for me, where I want to be, interestingly enough, isn't going to look that different from where I am as an associate because a lot of people have a teaching job, a teaching position, and then they see clients on the side. And so that's what I will be doing as I'm an associate, and that's actually that'll be what I'll wind up doing once I'm fully licensed. So it's really interesting. My life won't look that different pre-license, post-license, but the interesting question is, what do I want to learn as an associate clinician, and what does that side practice look like? Do I capitalize on the fact that I'm already a speech language pathologist and maybe specialize in working with people who have communication disorders that are also struggling with mental health, people who stutter, people who have Parkinson's, voice disorders, speech sound disorders, kids who are bullied. So those diagnoses are in the DSM. And so part of me wonders if that's the obvious niche for me. But there's also a part of me that's really thinking, this period of my life when I'm being supervised, when I am an associate, this is a chance for me to learn as much as I can and to maybe see as many different types of clients as I can. So I'm kind of that mindset at this point of I really want to learn as much as I can and be exposed to as much as I can, because even though working with people with communication disorders might be the obvious choice for me, it might not really be where my passion lies. So I hope that answered the question.
It does. It does. It actually is. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very insightful. I didn't know, so I ended up trying a lot of different things, and I think that did help support the work that I ended up doing or what I'm doing now. And so I think that is a good strategy, but it means it doesn't narrow your current job search.
Yeah. And I even heard some wild advice, which is a supervisor once told me the population you think you would never, ever wind up working with very often becomes the population that you wind up serving, which I don't know. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but yeah, you never know.
In your job searches, what kind of pay are you seeing being advertised? Or are the positions that you're looking at, are they even advertising pay at all?
So, because I'm in California, I just want to say, these rates are probably specific to my state. But I think what I've mostly seen is $45 an hour, sometimes $35 an hour for an actual hour of providing therapy to a client. And then I've even seen some that will pay like a smaller, like 22 an hour, maybe for more administrative tasks or things of that nature. Yeah, that tends to be what I'm seeing. And honestly, even though I mentioned, well, I'm in a position where I could volunteer my time, I don't even like putting that out into the universe, because I feel like there's so many associate clinicians where that is not an option. And I feel like even though I say I could have done that, I feel like after a while I would have gotten probably resentful. Like, wow, I'm doing like 10 to 15 hours a week. It would probably feel like way more of a job than my teaching position. And yet that would be the thing that I'm not getting paid for. So yeah, but that tends to be what I'm seeing, but I'm sure there's a range.
In the job search, you identified potentially AI responses. Have you been through interviews that were notable, things that were surprising, things that might be helpful for other new grads who are coming into the job market?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate because I have a friend who graduated from an MFT program just a couple months before I did. And what's really interesting is he's working with a supervisor that wants him to do all of his own notes, and it really wants him to get good at that skill. And yet there is another person that I will be interviewing with very soon, another group practice where they advertise, like, one of their selling points is we use an AI transcription software to like do your notes for you. And that is just something really interesting because even as a faculty member, like the use of AI in academia is a very, very hot topic. And I think in academia, we think, well, as a professor, I know how to do something now, but I want AI to help me with it. And I feel like we're always telling our students, but you need to learn how to do it yourself first, and then you can let AI take over. So yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if I do wind up taking this position that I have an interview coming up for. I think that once I see how effective that note-taking software can be, once I get a taste for it, I'm not going to want to go back.
Oh, I can already verify that is true.
Is it true? Yeah. I mean, I just and it's interesting. I know there's some concerns and, privacy, confidentiality, all that, but I just feel like that that horse has already left the barn. And so
Yes.
yeah, I'm kind of excited about it, truthfully, because if it's about saving time and yet still creating a good quality note, I think there's a place for it for sure.
Last year when you were on, we were asking you about current events and how they were being discussed in your coursework, and you'd kind of said, kind of. Was there more that came out, especially now that we're talking about artificial intelligence? Was that something in the last year that you ended up getting more conversations in some of your classes about?
Yeah, it's funny. The last time we spoke, it was right after the election, but it was before I had my all-day Saturday intensive experience. My program, for those who didn't hear the first podcast, it's unique because it's a hybrid program where most of it was online, but one Saturday every month we would have a face-to-face sort of experiential component to the program. And so, yeah, my faculty, especially because it was a social work program, they were very much about bringing into the classroom what was happening with current events, helping students that might have been from marginalized communities, be able to express some of their fears and talk about what's going on. So I really applaud them for that. And I think sometimes as faculty, we're trained to kind of keep our own personal opinion out of the classroom because we don't know how students vote. But I think there's a way of setting it up so that constructively people, perhaps on even both sides, can talk about what they're experiencing. And yeah, I really applaud my program. I have a lot of good things to say about them. And I also have to give you credit because after my first podcast aired, I actually didn't tell anybody in my program that I was on the podcast. But one of the faculty happened to listen and she contacted me and said, I just want you to know I would be willing to supervise you once you graduate. And I thought that was really wonderful because, I don't know where I'm going to wind up working, but the fact that I had somebody that was willing to supervise me based on what I spoke about in the podcast was really, really nice.
Have current events impacted any of the training or the work that you've been looking for, any of the things? Has it impacted you at all, the current events that we're kind of tiptoeing around?
Yeah, I, in some ways, I just feel like if there was a need for therapists prior to, the last couple of years, that need would be even more amplified. So but I see all of these articles on AI just popping up everywhere. And so I do wonder, like right now, it's totally a tool that therapists can use, but yeah, I'm not sure about what the future is going to hold. I don't think a computer would ever replace that human to human interaction that's really a fundamental ingredient of therapy. But yeah, I don't know. I think that when the world is burning, I think there tends to be more of a need for people to to speak with therapists. And so in some ways, I think we should have some job security. But I also don't know because of funding issues, especially when it comes to county funding and yeah, even the education department, because I teach speech language pathology students who are often employed in the public schools and IDEA, all the special education mandates. Their services are guaranteed in the schools because of some of these policies. And so if the future of those policies is up in the air, I think it can be very scary for either profession, speech pathology or mental health.
In the program that you were in, the last year, you were talking about all the various aspects that social workers can go, and the some of the classmates that you're seeing are people lining up towards clinical jobs, people going more towards macro kind of work. Are you still in touch with many of your classmates?
Yeah, we've actually formed a text thread. And so we used to have a platform called Slack where we would communicate with one another. And so now we sort of moved over to a text thread. And I would say most of us, because it was specifically a behavioral health emphasis track, it was especially designed for people wanting to become therapists. Most of us have gone down that road of trying to get licensed clinically. Some people have taken a little bit of a break post school. Like, I know I need to probably start accumulating those hours, but I'm not ready. I just need a moment to breathe. One of my classmates did get into hospital social work, so that's kind of exciting. So, yeah, we've definitely kept in touch. And because I was the first person to take the law and ethics exam, I was sort of the cheerleader, like, you can do it, Yeah.
What type of support are you looking for at this point in your journey as an associate clinician?
I'm so glad I listened to the podcast that you put together on the supervisory process because that podcast was really illuminating in terms of kind of how supervision can get derailed. I remember, Katie, you talked about how sometimes, a supervisor who might be particularly burnt out would say, I don't even want to talk psychology. Like, tell me your favorite movie that you watched. Do you remember saying that?
I do, and I remember that supervisor of mine who basically that was how he started every group supervision.
Yeah. And then or sometimes they would just end early, and so I think Curt was the one that said, it should be built into the supervisory process that you do some recording. You see how you interact with clients. It's not just talking about what you did, but really getting that feedback, watching yourself, having the supervisor watch, also structuring the supervision session. Like it's a skill to be a good supervisor. And so Dr. Parks, who had put together that supervisor list, was really adamant, like all supervisors are not created equal, and so for me, I think another thing that Curt said is, you want a supervisor that you can just relate to on a human level. A friend of mine actually had a supervisor who he was not even allowed to ask, like, how are you? How are you doing? That was off limits. And so I feel that as much as I want to learn and I want to have a supervisor that has a lot of knowledge and is skilled, there's also that just human part. Like, who's going to want to work with me, Derek, as a human being? Because I remember Curt saying, this is somebody you have to see every week for years, So that's the piece of it that I took away is this is a human being that's going to be a really important part of my life. So I want them to like me and I want to be able to like them as a human being, in addition to having somebody that just is skilled and that's receptive and open. So yeah, those are the things I'm looking for.
I think you've kind of answered this in a couple of different ways here, but as you're approaching the next steps in your journey, finding practicum, you're looking for something that fits your needs, being able to have just a few hours. Is there trainings that you're looking for that you feel, grad school just didn't prepare me for this? I feel like I have to go out and get something right now because I feel left behind by where the field is.
Hmm. Yeah, I did do some outside trainings even when I was a grad student. So I I did a level 3. It's called the fast track program in a CBT program called Team CBT. I have a lot of respect for those trainers and clinicians. And so at least that's one area that I feel like, okay, there's always more to learn, but I'm like, okay, I at least feel like I have that in my wheelhouse, some CBT training. But I feel like it's just there's so much to learn. I had a potential interview with a group practice that kind of specializes in eating disorders, and so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so green. I would need so much knowledge. And there's also, the issue of being a male clinician. Like in some ways it's a benefit, but look at eating disorders. Like would a young woman really ideally want to talk to a man? Like you don't know what it's like to be a woman in this world and the pressures that, women experience. So it is interesting. I think there are definitely trainings I want to do more of, DBT, for example, and of course, internal family systems. I feel like I have this beginner's mind, but at least I feel like I have a pretty strong foundation, at least maybe because I've been a speech pathologist for a long time. I at least feel like I'm pretty comfortable with that therapeutic exchange of working with individuals. It's just that I want to make sure that I'm, continuing to learn and grow.
So, what are your hopes for what you'll be reporting back when we check in with you again next year?
Oh gosh, I didn't know it was a three-parter. I don't know. Remember, I'm on the path to licensure where I'll finally become an LCSW when I'm 96. So you may want to revisit, like, where's Derek in his journey? I was actually going to joke and because of course we haven't spoken for a year. I was going to say, like, nah, I threw in the towel. I'm making balloon animals now for a traveling circus. Like, like, so hopefully I will still be on the path to becoming a therapist. And what was your question again? Where would I be next year when you
Yeah,
check
where
in
do
with?
you hope you'll be next year?
Oh boy. Well, I hope that I will have chipped away at those 3,000 hours. I hope that I will have a supervisor that is accessible and understanding and who's knowledgeable. And one thing I will also share, it's not official, but I am applying for a sabbatical to go to be basically excused from my teaching responsibilities in the fall of 2026. So that would mean if I'm able to take a step back from teaching and being on committees and meeting with students, that maybe I will be able to accumulate more hours than I think. And I'm literally writing that into my faculty development leave. Is part of what will make me a better professor is to be licensed, to make a stronger attempt at getting licensed. So we'll see. I hopefully that will have taken place. If we talk to each other, I'll know if that's happening or not. And yeah, I might be further along in the process than I think.
Anywhere that you want to share people to connect with you, follow along with you?
I know. Part of me, it sounds like a plea for help. Like, please hire me, somebody. You can reach me at yeah. So I don't even have a website yet. But if you look up my name, Derek Isetti, University of the Pacific, you can find my email address there. If people would like to get in touch with me, if you've got a soft spot for a therapist who's looking towards accumulating his hours a little more on the slow side. The fact that I threw out the fact that I'd be willing to be a volunteer, who knows? Maybe people.
You're gonna get so many emails.
You can work for me for free. Yeah, so we'll see. But yeah, dizetti1@pacific.edu is my email address. And yes, maybe by next year, I might even have like a Psychology Today profile up and running and perhaps a website. So
We will include links to Derek's information in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and follow along with us on our social media. Join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist group, to continue on with these and other conversations. Follow us on Substack. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy and Derek Isetti.
Over 225,000 practitioners already use Simple Practice to grow their business and simplify admin tasks that take time away from their clients. Isn't it time your EHR worked as hard as you do? Find out more at simplepractice.com.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.